Hi and welcome to Linus Napoleonic Shipyard, and today we are going to talk a little bit about ensigns, pennants and signal hoists, and also yaks. And how I got into this is because I was building the HMS Victory, and that was the third time I'm building that model in 1:700 scale. And as I was building that, I started thinking of the placement of signal number 16, engage enemy more closely, at Trafalgar. And that led me down another rabbit hole, and I ended up here. So this is not going to be a build report in the normal sense. Instead, we're going to focus on signal flags and pennants and ensigns and so on. And then if you would like to see the build, because it is that model I was doing the unboxing of, the Neverland hobby model, then I'm going to put a chapter marker and you can just go to that chapter. I am not going to narrate that section. It's just going to be the build in pictures, and then you can see how I did and what I did to bring it to the point where it was. I give you a few ideas before. And as I said, I built this ship a couple of times in this scale, and I hope it got better and better each time. We'll see. So anyway, as I was building, I was thinking about like, oh yeah, so the signal, normally I read somewhere the signal is going to be on the mizzen, right? And then yeah, I looked at my older model, which I ended up stealing, but I looked at pictures and I was like, So I have the Vice Admirals flag at the main, and then I ended up with the commission and pennant at the fore. That is from a painting, I think, but that would be the wrong way, right? Nelson was a Vice Admiral. Vice Admirals would carry their broad pennant at the fore, and then there would be the commissioning pennant at the main. So I started researching. This is by no means, remember, I'm not an historian or anything, I'm just a hobbyist, so this is by no means something definitive, but I hope it can be a bit of a guide for me and for you guys on how to go in general. And I'm going to split it a little bit. There's going to be some history, but I'm also going to split it into at the time of Trafalgar, so 1805, but then also earlier, before, so during the Revolutionary War, so actually before that, so the ancient regime. A little bit, give you an idea. I'm going to go from a British perspective because I don't mostly do British ships, but I'm also going to mention some of the French and also the Spanish, especially at Trafalgar. No Americans today, just going to keep it to those three major nations during the Napoleonic Wars. So let's start with the placement. And I have to say as well, normally I go more from a script, so I'm reading from a script. I write the script, of course, but I read from the script. So today I'm more going to go freehand. And I'm not also going to cut away all the ass and ums, because it takes me 50 million years to do that. And obviously I'm just a tree end and I do a lot of that stuff. So I hope the ones who like the channel can stand this, and I don't have to cut too much into this. I'm just gonna go in one go. So let's start with the placement of these things. Now, primarily we're talking about the British ship, but I'm coming to the French and the Spanish. So you had the ensign, and the ensign, that was the very large flag, and that was at the stern. At sea, and now we're talking at the age where you'd have the spanker at the rear. So before that it would be a lateen, and as I understand it, the lateen ships, they would have this stern pole also at sea. But correct me if I'm wrong there, I didn't look into that too deeply since we're at the Napoleonics. Anyway, the ensign would at sea be carried at the peak of the gaff. So you have a line running up that to the gaff, and then on the mizzen, and then the ensign would be flying from that. In harbor, you'd be carrying a smaller ensign, and that ensign would be on a staff, on the ensign staff. So a harbor ensign. A war ensign was, and I'm going to get to that also, was usually very large. I mean, it was used for recognition with gun smoke and so on, to avoid confusion. Some of the Spanish ones at Trafalgar were just tremendously large, and we know this because there's surviving examples. I mean, there's example, I think the one from, I'm sure, I'm going to get to it, I have the notes. I think it was 15 meters long. Can you imagine a flag 15 meters long? And only that is huge. It's like the size of a house. So that was about the ensign and the placement of the ensigns. In general, the jack, like a Union Jack, would be at the bow, on the bowsprit, on the jack staff. And it would be only in harbor or at anchor. So big reason for this is once you're underway, and these ships during the period, they had these jib sails, right? And the jibs would probably interfere with the staff, so they would get fouled, and so you wouldn't be carrying that at sea. There is instances of the jack being carried in battle for recognition, among them Trafalgar, but I'm going to get to that. But in general, if you're making a ship and you just want it looking like it's in combat, you should probably avoid the jack. Unless you're making a diorama or a harbor scene, then it's really proper. The commissioning pennant was at the main masthead. And that would be a all day, all time signal, right? Stay up day and night. And that is signifying a commissioned warship. So that's a pennant to show that you're a warship of a certain navy. So it's a recognition thing. And also a sign of authority, right? You're showing like, I am a warship of Spain, for instance. So that's about the commissioning pennant. I'm going to go deeper into this thing. I'm just talking about the general placement of these things. You would have Commodores broad pennants. Later on, this was more strictly regulated, and there were classes and so on. Earlier on, this broad pennant, as I understand it, would be carried on the mizzen. And the broad pennant, the first type of broad pennant, or that, I would say that would be the Commodore's broad pennant, would be carried on the mizzen to signify a Commodore of the white, the red, or the blue squadrons, and I'm going to get to that as well. Then, as you move up to these rear admiral or vice admirals, that would be carried on the fore, if I understand it right. And then an admiral would be carrying his broad pennant on the main. So that's in general about those broad pennants. Signal hoist is a totally different thing, and there is different eras for the signal hoist. But typically, if we're talking Napoleonics, it would be on a top-gallant masthead or topsail yard arms, so that you could run them up. And why they would be up there is for recognition, right? It's easy to read, and the read order would be top-down within a hoist, and then across multiples, if I understand it. This might be something, I wasn't really clear on it, it might be something later. But I suppose also the Popham, and we're getting to that, would be using this. So that would be main, fore, mizzen, starboard before port, and upper yards before lower. I don't know how many hoists they would have at the time, and we're going to get to that, like how many hoists would be up at the time, because they should be easily readable to all. And so if you have hoists on one side of the ship, that would be useful if all the ships that you're talking to are on that side. But if it's on the other side, maybe the sails is going to cover them. Anyway, if your ships are under sail and fighting, show the ensign at the peak of the gaff and not on the little pole at the stern, unless you're doing earlier ships, so before the Napoleonics and maybe like 17th century or so on. Then this Latins on the mizzen, I guess they would just have it on that pole. I'm not sure. I haven't looked into it, but yeah. Napoleonics. No jack unless anchored, and keep the commissioning pennants and the broad pennants flying. so they should be up if there is a commander on your ship, like you're modeling a commander commanding ship. So that's about the placement in general. So that's how we start this thing out. So let's go into a little bit of a long view, like how was it earlier. So we have the one thing is the Union flag and how that evolved, like 1606, 1707, 1801. It changed over time, right? And it was both a national flag and a jack at sea. And as I said earlier, after the fore and aft head sails became standard, the jack staff would be interfering with the jibs. So jacks would be flown only in harbor unless stated specifically otherwise. So privateers were ordered to fly a distinct red jack with a Union in the canton, and this was by a 1694 proclamation, and that would be to stop them aping Royal Navy ships. And maybe this is I'm not sure, but this might be the origins of, because there's this thing, and I couldn't really verify it fully, but where a ship on an independent command, so not under a squadron, would be carrying the red ensign. But we'll get to that. But might be something. So we have these squadron colors, and that was an order of council from 1707, if I understand it right, and that would be the flags of the Admiralty. So the red ensign was the legal ensign of Great Britain. So the main ensign would be the red ensign, and then you would have the white and the blue as tactical variants tied to squadron organization. So basically you'd have the red squadron, the white squadron, and the blue squadron. And from this time and onward into the early 1900s, the Royal Navy was divided into these 3 squadrons, and the ensign color would track the flag officer squadron. So if you're under a Commodore of the blue or a Rear Admiral of the blue or so, you'd be carrying a blue ensign, and you would also carry a blue commissioning pennant. All the commissioning pennants would have this section, at this time at least, with the white and the red St. George's cross. But then the fly part of the pennant would be the color of the squadron. The whole system was abolished in 1864, and then white became the sole color. So blue moved to government service, and red became the merchant ensign at that time. But before, and we're talking Napoleonics, you should definitely model the squadrons. So you have the white, the red, and the blue. So I went a little bit into the look of this commissioning pennant, and the commission pennant, that was like the main recognition of these warships. And it would be very long, especially on some things, maybe all the way up to the length of the ship, if I understand it right. Thin, very thin, thinner than we mostly see in examples as we see models and so on, because it is very long, it is thin, so it can fly properly. And it would always have this St. George's cross near the hoist or near the mast, with a white section. So a white section with a red cross on it. And then the other part, the long part of it, would be the squadron color. So white, blue, or red. So keep this in mind. Think like if you're making a fleet, maybe your whole fleet is from a squadron. or maybe you want some variation, and there could be battles, I guess, where you'd have ships from different squadrons. Nelson specifically asked every ship to carry the white ensign and the white pennant during Trafalgar to avoid confusion, because there's many nations involved. But there were ships from different squadrons, so that way we can see that a battle could contain ships with different squadrons. If you're doing Trafalgar, all white. So thin, long, colored, matching the ensign and the squadron. The broad pennants, by regulation of 1806, should be the squadron color. And it should have a small white ball on it if the Commodore would be commanding his own ship. So there would be no second captain on the ship, and would be a white dot on it, if I understand it right. Then later rules would split it into first class Commodores, red or white, and then second class blue. The whole system with colors ends, as I said, in 1864. But it is nice to model it in, and I've done it on a few models where I have this Commodore's panel, or I have a Rear Admirals pennant and so on. It's nice to have them in the right place. So think about it, and usually at the mizzen for a Commodore. And remember also, ensign period sizes, they were really large. I mean, we're talking yards, 9 to 17 yards. 17 yards is 15 meters. As I said, like, these are huge things. So don't worry about picking. Usually, if I go with the Warlord set, of which are nice, they produce these sets on this harder paper that you can just fold and glue, and if you paint them a bit, I find, like, I don't use them as they are. I always paint over the colors, which is a little bit of a hassle, but it looks much better, shading and so on. I lost my... Yeah, so when I use them, what I do is I always try to go one size bigger. So if I have a brig, I'll use a frigate size ensign. And if I have a frigate, I'll use a third rate size ensign. And then for some of the really large ships, I didn't do it on my latest build of Victory. I just used the first rate ensign there. It's because it's quite large already, but I did it before where I wanted a really large one on my 120 gun Is it not Cornwallis? Is it Cornwallis? No, Cornwallis is a forfeit. It is the Caledonia, HMS Caledonia. And then I did a custom, really large ensign for that. Yeah. And so by the spanker's rise, the ensign migrates from the stern staff, like we said, to the peak gaff under sail. Let's go into some of the other countries involved, especially in Trafalgar and also earlier. So we have the French practice during the Ancien regime, and this is before the revolution. So the French royal fleet used a plain white ensign. There was some other, like maybe galleys would be carrying a red, and so there's some confusion there. But the ancient regime, then white is the color. Sometimes with some decoration and so on, but go with that. I didn't dig too deep into this because we're mostly doing the Revolutionary Wars and the Napoleonics on my channel, or when we're playing, so I focused on that. So 1790 to 1794 there were some changes. In 1790 they introduced a canton on a white field. So then you got that tricolour at the corner of a white flag. And then by the 1794 decree, that was completely replaced by a large tricolour. So you have those fields on the tricolour, the red and the white and the blue fields. At the mastheads of French ships, there would be a flamme de guerre. And the flamme de guerre is basically, it's a commissioning pennant. And there, it was actually decided it would be specific portions. So the blue would be 1/5, and then there would be a center section would be 1/5 white, and then the rest of the pennant should be red. So 3/5 of the entire length of the pennant would be red. So that's something to go by. Remember, I tend to also with the pennants go one size larger for my ships, and then I'll cut it a little bit thinner than if you're using that Warlord Games set, just to make them look a little bit more at scale. Of course, if you're doing wargaming, maybe it's better just for recognition. I mean, I understand why they're a little bit wider. It's easier to handle and easier to see, but historically I think they were a little thinner. That's at least what I can see from paintings and what I read. So, Revolutionary Emperor French of Men of War, tricolour ensign and pennants. And pre-1790 sets, if you're playing something before 1790, you need to do that plain white. So that makes it a little difficult for French ships. Of course, you have the British ships, the little Union flag at the canton of the ensign needs to change over time as well. So if you're doing before 1801, you need another ensign if you want to do it completely historically correct. I think in war games, if you're not super just building for a special, go with Napoleonics, because yeah, easier for you. But you decide. Remember, there are differences. The Spanish practice initially was also before the degree white, like a Bourbon white. You call it like from the house of Bourbon, and that was changed in 1785. I got this wrong, so I've done this wrong, where I had the commissioning pennant white for a Spanish ship. We all make mistakes. I was really sure about that, and I read, but you know, there's several different sources, but I read in sources that there would be use of this all white steel during the Napoleonic, this all white pennant, but I couldn't verify it later. I went with it because I was like, oh yeah, that sounds that maybe they wouldn't change that and then only use the other one for, because that's what I read. It turned out I think that was wrong, and of course the Warlord Games, they probably did a research, and so if you're using that set, you're doing it the right way, I have to say. So, and this is after 1785. So all Spanish warships, they fly the ensign with the red, yellow, red, and with the royal arms in the center of the yellow section, or closer to the mast. And then the gallardete, the commissioning pennant, would be the same 3 stripes. So it would be the wider yellow field in the middle, and on the yellow field would be the arms close to the hoist. And this is very explicit. Once I found that decree, okay. Well, but the Spanish, they did have problems earlier with all these different types of pennants. So maybe it could be supported if you want to have a different type of pennant, especially if you're doing it before 1785, of course. But to be sure, after 1785, gallardete and ensign, the red, yellow, red with the arms. Okay, so that was about the pennants and a little bit of the broad pennants, and also about the ensigns. So now we get to, and that was the main reason why I ended up in this, is these signaling flags. So before there was this structured signaling, it was all a little bit ad hoc, I find, when I read the sources, especially earlier on, like, oh yeah, the admiral loses his foretop and fires a gun, and then that means anchor or something. It seemed like maybe you decided that in the fleet at the moment, or there were instructions, but I like, it seemed a little bit less structured before that time, I have to say. But there, I'm sure there needed to be some kind of structure, but because, I mean, there were large battles. I have to say, I came into wargaming or ship wargaming, actually not from French, British and Spanish ships or Napoleonics. I was interested in the earlier, like the 17th century Swedish-Danish wars, and with, or Dano, like there was the Dutch and the Danes and the British were there as well. And there were these large sea battles, like the one, I think 1676 at the south point of Ireland, where the Royal Crown sank. I've been super into it because there's really, I was studying in that city, Kalmar, and there's a really nice museum. If you're close by, you should go there. The Eastern Sea, just like with Vasa, it preserves, there's no shipworm, right? So it preserves the finds really well. That ship went down with everyone. From a mistake, probably in maneuvering with turning with the gun ports opening, ship capsized, something lit the gunpowder magazine, and the whole thing went up. But it's a treasure trove, archaeology, because you find all those different parts that the crew would carry with them. It's all preserved there at the bottom. Of course, the ship is not so well preserved. I mean, the parts are, but it blew up, right? But that is my interest in it, and later on I would really love to do some wargaming in this age. I've looked at a couple of rule sets, wasn't really super happy with them, but I guess you could just, like with the Black Seas, there is this earlier age, right? So you could implement that and play these earlier battles, I guess. Of course, you need to find models for it and so on. Because my dream is to have the Royal Crown and make her do better than she did in history. Make her not blow up right in front of the Dano-Dutch fleet, like insane. Anyway, so that's my entrance into this. And I was thinking, because sometimes on those paintings you see them they have those pennants, but there's more like many pennants, more like deco looks like, or heraldic, and that's the origins of the pennant, if I understand it right, was something that the knights would carry into combat, to like a heraldic pennant. It has a special name, I forget it. And then once they commanded ships, they would carry that pennant with them, and they would fly from the ship. And if I understand it, that's actually the actual origin of a commissioning pennant. But then you also have those signal flags for the ships to communicate. So by 1790, you have Lord Howe's numeral book. And it used 10 numeral flag plus substitutes. And was an important step beyond this old, more ad hoc system. So there were some set signals in that. And then by 1799, we have the Admiralty signal book. And that was a day and night signal, and it would be fleet wide. And these are the ones, you know, that if you read novels and so on, those are always like weighted and sunk, so that they're not going to get taken by enemies. It would be bad for the enemy to have your signal book, right? Because that would easily lead to some ruse de guerre. Then in 1803, you have the telegraphic signals by Popham coming, and that changed a lot of things. So the whole signal would be started by a telegraph flag, like if you're signaling the fleet, and that would usually, I think it would be diagonal red-white, and that's signifying, okay, prepare, it's going to be a signal, prepare to read the flags. And it could even be used to write out words. So you have a vocabulary. So you can do more advanced messages using this system. And this is the system that was in use during the Battle of Trafalgar, for instance. So you have, like, for instance, engage enemy more closely. That would be 16, so it's 1 and 6. So the flags 1 and 6, and that's the signal for engage enemy more closely. And that would be usually hoisted with first the telegraph flag. Okay, prepare for the signal. Here's the signal, engage enemy more closely. And then you end with a blue-yellow flag that signifies the end of message. Nelson usually decided to keep that flag or that signal flying, as he did at Trafalgar. It was flying until shot away. So that message wouldn't then be ended, but the hoist would stay up. You can find this online if you're interested. We use a version of it. Sometimes it's like a simplified version, but it's fun in some games. And I think for some event, if I'm gonna run it, I might actually have the people try that. And it's called Hoist Signals Aloft. It's the system for signaling flags. And we did some house rule version of that, simplified, and it was a lot of fun when we did that game. So the only way you're allowed to communicate with fellow captains is with hoists, and you have a certain amount of hoists depending on your rank. It was a lot of fun. Sidetracked, but something. Yeah, and I talked about the order of hoists before and so on. Outside of Trafalgar, though, if we're talking 1805 era, remember, squadron colors, they matter. Ships under a particular flag officer would wear his squadron's ensign color and also the pennant. So that would be matched. Detached or independent service, you'll often see the red ensign in period practice, where a ship is not operating in a divided fleet. Consistent with the 1707 paperwork that recognized the red as the legal ensign and the white and blue as squadronal variations. So it is reasonable, how do you call that in English, inference, to say that on an independent command you'll be carrying the red ensign. But I couldn't find any distinct. Of course, making it easy, maybe you use make your fleet under the red. This is the red squadron fleet, and then when it's on independent service, it's also red, right? That could work. But I've had my ships in the past. I'd had the squadron, maybe blue, on the commission pennant, and then I would have a red ensign as for an independent command, and that looks really nice with the blue pennant and the red ensign. Of course, I found that also in painting. I think the one of the HMS Majestic as a Resé, she has those different colors on her pennant, and that's where I got the idea from. Anyway, or was it maybe Endymion? I'm not sure. I have to look that up. But it's an interesting thing to do. From now on, I will not do it, since after doing this research, then the safe bet would be to have the ensign the same color as your pennant. So, if in doubt. Union Jack at the bow only when moored, as I said. There is example like at Trafalgar, where it's actually worn aloft. Yeah. So if we go into the specifics of Trafalgar, there is eyewitness accounts and so on that states that there were Union Jacks hoisted at the topgallant stays, or the forestays, so for easier recognition. So that was a specific order. So there would be a jack up flying from the stay, the forestay there, and that was on the directions of Lord Nelson. There's also accounts of more ensigns being carried aloft, but I couldn't find more about that, so I'm just going to leave it at that. Probably someone else knows more about it. To be sure, just carry an ensign at the gaff peak, and then the commission and pennant aloft, and a jack at the forestay. And this is the way I chose to do it on my HMS Victory model. I'm going to show it here to you again, and also at the end, of course, but that's the way. Why I chose to do it this way is because of this. Remember, Trafalgar also white ensigns across the fleet, and that was because that was ordered. This famous signal using Popham's code, England expects every man to do his duty, was signaled at 11:45 a.m. and was hoisted in sections. We know that. Using a telegraph flag and hoists. How many hoists were up at the same time? That is not certain. I show you here my second version of HMS Victory, where I have the whole signal up on different hoists, and I saw illustrations with this. I think that would be probably practical, as the whole signal would be hard to read. I think more they would be hoisted maybe at those topgallants, or maybe topgallant yards, and at the main mast, mizzen, maybe for easy reading. So maybe 3 hoists at a time or so on. Not sure. But the signal was hoisted quite quickly to the whole fleet and carried on by the signal frigates. The final order that Nelson signal was number 16, and that is the 1 and the 6 hoists, as you can see here on my third version of the Victory. That is engage enemy more closely. And that was kept aloft until shot away. And we have first-hand accounts of that being on the main mast and not on the mizzen mast. But often you see it on the mizzen mast. I think this is not completely sure, so I'm not going to say definitively. I chose to do it this way. So the signal is carried at the main mast below the commissioning pennant. Yeah, the practice would probably be at the mizzen, but I can't see this as an absolute. Correct me, please, if you know more. Correct me if I'm wrong. Give me the best possible idea here. If we look at the French and Spanish at Trafalgar, they would have these really large ensigns, both the French and the Spanish, especially the Spanish. There are surviving examples. And they would be following the 1794 decree for the French, and the 1785 one for the Spanish. So if you have those warlord sets, you're not wrong. Go with that. Remember to keep the red part of the flamme de guerre on the French, the long part, 3/5 should be red, if you're following the regulations. If you're depicting earlier wars, think about the St. George Act, ensigns before 727, Union in the Canton, and when the red, white, and blue structure came into play. Privateers wearing the red jack with the Union Canton, and so on. French with the plain white naval ensign before. And then this cross with the white with the tricolour at the canton, and then you have the full tricolour. And then white before the 1785 decree for the Spanish. Yeah. The standard practice, I want to say something more about engaging more closely. So the standard practice was for these important signals to be at topgallant masthead or topsail yardarms, as I said, and that's visibility and reading top down. Later, Royal Navy manuals record main before mizzen, when multiple masts carry different hoists. Period art often shows number 16 high on the main or the mizzen. Mostly mizzen, I have to say, in period art. We can't be sure, and there is this account of it being hoisted in the main, and that's why I went with it that way. So plausible at best, I'd say on that, unless someone is a real historian and knows for sure and can help me. Don't have a jack underway unless you're modeling something specific. That's a common mistake. Like a teeny stern pole ensign during action would serve no purpose, right? Because it's there for recognition, so you want it large so everyone can recognize it through the gun smoke. So peak or gaff, so the peak and on the gaff there. Yeah, I guess that's it. I've dug into a lot of sources here for this. British flags by V.G. Perrin. Some orders, royal decrees, the French decree of 1794, so the Spanish one of 1785, and so on. Popham's telegraph signals from 1803, the signal book before that, and so on. Checklist. Let's do it one more time. So Royal Navy, if we're doing 1803 to 1806. Ensign, white, blue, red per squadron. White across the fleet at Trafalgar. The Union Jack only at harbor, unless you're modeling Trafalgar or some other specific battle where you know it was carried. Commissioning pennant, St. George close to the hoist with this white section and the red cross, and then would be the fly would be red, white or blue depending on squadron. Commodore present would be a broad pennant in the squadron's color, white ball if he's commanding his own ship, and that would be on the mizzen. Vice Admiral and I think Rear Admiral at the fore. So that would be a broad pennant at the fore, and that would be the broad pennant would be like, for example, for instance, the white would be a larger, broader pennant with the St. George's cross, white background, red cross. Signals before 1790 a little bit more unclear, and then you have this 1799 Admiralty standardization and Pophams after that. French ensign from 1794, tricolour, flamme de guerre, 1/5 blue, 1/5 white, and then 3/5 red. Earlier plain white. Spain post the 1785, both the ensign and the gallardete would be red, yellow, red with the arms. Yeah, so that's about it for this time about signal flags and ensigns. I am going to show you here the whole build of the latest version of the Victory, and before that I'm showing you my first build, and that is a model by Artist Hobby. If you can find it, it's very hard to find nowadays. It's a great model for the photo edge, and the brass that comes with it for building mast is great. The hull I think sucks, I'm sorry, but that resin hull is bad. It's ugly, it doesn't really correspond with the real thing. Looks like an earlier version, like before the refit. Anyhow, I've used that for my second build that I show here, where I'd used a Turner Miniatures hull. I can really recommend that. I think Turner Miniatures does a good job with their resin hulls. And I then used the mast sections and the photo edge from the Artist Hobby kit to build this second ship. And here you can see this wrong placement of the commissioning pennant and the broad pennant, and then the entire England Expect signal is up here on this. Looks great, looks fun, but that's not how she looked when she broke the line, and that's how I wanted it for my last version. So this is the last version, and this is one I'm going to show in the build. And this is the Neverland hobby. Has okay photo edge, not as good as Artist hobby. So if you can get the Artist hobby, go with that. There's more detail in that one. The rat lines and the shrouds and so they're fine on this kit. I added some from other kits to the Neverland, and I'm gonna show it in the build log here where I added some things. I actually wanted to have the whole stern from Turner Miniatures resin print, and I managed to cut the whole thing off with a nice fine Proxon cutter. And then as I was gonna clean it up, I just snapped it in the middle. Resin is quite brittle and the piece just flew off, and I ended up not finding it, so I redid the whole stern by hand. So I used the one from the model. I think it's not as accurate, but it was fun hand painting all the little details and so on that. And I also used the figurehead from Turner Miniatures, so I cut that off, Turner Miniatures 3D print, and then added it to this one because I think it has more detail. So that's a Turner Miniatures part. And also the fighting tops are from Turner Miniatures, because the fighting tops that came with the kit were blank. They look crap, so I cut them away and ended up with Turner Miniature ones. And some photo edge also used from other kits here to enhance the model. I also ended up using only brass for the entire rigging. Both standing and running, and that's because the masts were plastic. I wanted to use the masts, they're quite detailed, but very flimsy. So know that when you're building, it's going to be hard to rig this thing with wire, because the wire is going to just pull those thin plastic masts different ways. Maybe if you build it, it's fun to build all the details. I mean, there's even Nelson's bed inside if you want. I don't have it because I'm not going to see it. I cut mine to waterline, and I'm using it for wargames, right? It's not a model just for display. So maybe that's what you want to do. I did a little bit call out, and I'm going to say it again. If you have any questions for me on this video or any video or anything in general on the channel and so on, go ahead and go to that. I'm going to link it here, and go to that and ask your questions, because I think the next one is probably going to be a Q&A. We'll see. So if you want to watch the entire build, it's coming right now, and stay tuned. And for the rest of you that are not going to watch it, I just want to say fair winds, and hope to see you for the next one.